persistently high inflation rate and slow impact of reforms.
Okay, on to another story, this time from the Daily Post, and still has to do with the build-up to the 2027 election. 2027, Papanso faces tough decision moment as more heavyweights flood ADC. I thought it was supposed to be the golden bride for the APC. In any case, time will tell. Since the coalition of opposition leaders adopted the African Democratic Congress (ADC) as an official platform to contest the 2027 presidential election against President Bola Tinubu, there has been an influx of political actors into the party. Daily Post reports that the coalition, led by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, former Senate President David Mark, 2023 Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi, former governors of Rivers and Kaduna States Rotimi Amechi and Nasir El-Rufai, among other big wigs from the PDP, Labour Party and SDP, adopted ADC on Wednesday, July the 2nd, 2025. Some are group members of the All Progressives Congress, including the former national chairman of the APC, John Oyegun, former Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, ex-Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, and former Minister of Interior, Ogbeni Rauf Adegbeshola, are also part of the coalition aimed at wresting power from President Tinubu in 2027. Well, that's a story you find in the Daily Post today. It's a front page story. 2027, Kwan Council faces tough decision moment as more heavyweights flood ADC. Now they call them heavyweights. If you take these people one by one and assess them, their political sojourn or journey so far, you come up with a lot of negativity. So what's heavy about that? What's really heavy about that?
Well, the people that named them heavyweights know better reason why.
You need to stop making excuses for people. You need to stop making excuses for people.
Okay, and from the Vanguard newspaper, Dangote petrol refinery slashes petrol price to 820 naira per liter. Dangote petrol refinery yesterday slashed the depot price of premium motor spirit, also known as petrol, to 820 naira per liter from 838 naira per liter as competition heightens in Nigeria's domestic market. The adjustment was also due to the drop in crude oil prices to $70 per barrel yesterday from more than $77 per barrel in June 2025. However, other operators also adjusted their depot price at different rates in order to be competitive under the current circumstance. According to petrolprice.com, the Dangote petrol refinery made the highest adjustment.
Yes, on to another story, this time coming from the front page of The Punch. 2025 admissions. JAMB sets 150 benchmark bars on the 16. Isn't that, I don't know, they already start for the exam, so why are they just setting the benchmark now?
I think the benchmark sometimes comes after they're done with the exams, depending on performance recorded.
Well, we'll talk about that later, but I don't see that as a reasonable way to go. If the benchmark had been set before, the students who participated in the exams would have, been gingered to perform.
Exactly, because it seems like as the years are going by, it continues to reduce.
Precisely. I remember when I sat for JAMB, I scored 299. I couldn't even study law. It was too low to study law. So you can imagine they're cutting it at 150 now. It's bordering on the ridiculous. In any case, on to the next story. 2025 admissions, JAMB sets 150 benchmark bars on the 16. Well, there was a controversy initially too.
Yes.
That they were not going to admit people who were 16 and they were admitting people from 18 and above. Now they've swallowed it and vomited again. The Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board and the tertiary education stakeholders have approved the National Minimum Tolerable Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination Score, also known as the cutoff point for 2025 admission into the nation's universities. Also, the federal government reiterated its stand on the 16 years as a minimum for admission into tertiary institutions. At this year's annual policy meeting on admissions into tertiary institutions held in Abuja on Tuesday, the meeting adopted 150 as the benchmark for admission into universities and 100 for polytechnics and colleges of education. For more on that story, checked out, in the Punch today.
Yes, and still from the Vanguard newspaper, NAFDAC arrest 3 uncovers fake chemicals, expired flavors worth over 1 billion naira in Lagos. The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, yesterday uncovered an alleged illegal operation involving fake and expired food-grade chemicals, flavors, fertilizers, and repackaged raw materials valued at over 1 billion naira in Ketu area of Lagos State. The raid led to the arrest of 3 suspects and the sealing of 3 warehouses where the alleged illicit materials were being stored and distributed. For more updates on that, Vanguard newspaper is your guide.
And on to another story that has to do with the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, JAM. JAM uncovers fingerprint fraud in 19 CBT centers.
Wow.
Data released by the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board during its 2025 policy meeting on Tuesday revealed that computer-based test centers in Imo and Anambra states topped the list of centers busted for finger pairing malpractices. In total, about 19 centers were busted nationwide, with Anambra having 6, Imo with 4, Abia with 1, Edo with 1, Kano with 2 centers, Ebonyi, Delta, Kaduna Rivers, and Enugu with 1 center each. The Registrar of JAM, Professor Ishak Oluide, made this known in his presentation during a meeting held with Vice Chancellors, Rectors, and Provosts, among other stakeholders in Abuja on Tuesday. That's a very interesting one coming from the Punch. JAM uncovers fingerprint fraud in 19 CBT centers. But one wouldn't know if due process was actually done. I want to believe that it probably spreads across the length and breadth of the country.
Exactly.
If you discover it here, you're very likely to discover it somewhere else too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, and from the Sun newspaper, ADC mocks Tinubu over exclusion from U.S. trade talks. I think the Punch had such story as well.
Yes, and we did speak about that.
Yes. And also still from the Sun, coalition are structures intact, PDP. People's Democratic Party, PDP, has said its structure remains intact despite the recent unveiling of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, by some opposition politicians, including its members, as their preferred platform for the 2027 polls. Acting national chairman of the PDP, who stated while presenting certificate of returns to its candidate in the February 2026 area council election in the Federal Capital Territory, expressed confidence that the opposition party will win the polls.
And still coming from the Punch, and still on education, ASU branches resume lectures after June salary payment. The federal government on Tuesday released the June 2025 salaries of lecturers and other tertiary institution-based workers. Following the release of salaries, branches of the Academic Staff Union of Universities ASU wrote to their members to resume work. Recall that chapters of the union across certain federal universities had declared a no pay, no work policy following what they described as consistent delay in payment of money salaries over 5 months. The delay was attributed to the migration of academics from the IPPIS platform to the GIFMIS platform by the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. The branch chairperson of the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University, Dr. Haruna Angolu, noted that the members had resumed following the payment of the June 2025 salaries. Must there be any arm twisting in the education sector in this day and age?
Well,
that's the question.
That will be answered someday.
A laborer deserves his wages. Also in the same goes.
Yeah. And still from the education sector, FG pegs 16 years for tertiary school admission. Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, JAMB, and stakeholders, notably vice chancellors, rectors, and provosts, have endorsed new guidelines for the admission process in the new academic year 2025-2026. The suggestion and endorsement took place at the 2025 policy meeting on admissions into tertiary institutions and 5th edition of the National Tertiary Admissions Performance Merit Award in Abuja yesterday. The stakeholders set the cutoff mark for admissions into universities at 150, while that of the polytechnics and colleges of education were set at 100 and 140 points for colleges of nursing and health sciences. So I think they're still maintaining the 16 years of admission.
Well, but it was the controversy last year. They actually barred 16-year-olds from, being granted admission. This thing should be properly planned and, well laid out, not this policy today, another policy tomorrow, and all. It actually affects the people concerned.
Of course. Okay, and still from the Sun, FG reaffirms commitment to reform agenda, says Tinubu, not distracted. Federal government has reaffirmed the commitment of President Bola Tinubu administration to its core mandate of delivering meaningful reforms and real economic growth for all the citizens. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Alhaji Mohammed Idris, made this known in a statement on Tuesday in Abuja. Idris said, in spite of the noise by coalition and opposition, Tinubu is not distracted and remain undeterred. According to Idris, it is incontrovertible that the Tinubu's administration has affirmed the right of all Nigerians to freely exercise their constitutionally guaranteed freedoms of association and speech. For more updates on that, the Sun newspaper is your guide.
And now on to the Tribune this morning, where there's a story that says concurrence bills were brothers. Senate douses tension over rep threats. But he insisted that what was worth doing was worth doing well, adding that the Senate will not garbage in, garbage out. That's the Senate President, Akpabio, talking about responding to a threat made by the House of Reps. Now they know they're brothers. Let's hope the brotherhood lasts for a while, because we need all the unity we can have in the country right now. That's a story you'll find on the front page of the Tribune. And also coming from the Tribune, as a follow-up to the story Grace took earlier, the fact that Dangote refinery has pegged the price of petrol at 800 and something. It says here trillions of naira saved as Dangote refinery cuts prices. Now on to the story about concurrence bill, where brothers Senate douses tension over rep threats. Amid growing tension between the House of Representatives and the Senate over alleged delayed consideration of concurrence bills at the Red Chamber, Senate President Godswill Akpabio has doused the tension, describing the two chambers of the National Assembly as two brothers who could hardly make much progress without the support of each other. The Senate therefore concurred two House bills on Tuesday. The bills are African Union Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons, Domestication and Enforcement Bill 2025, and Food Vendors Registration Council of Nigeria Establishment Bill 2024. For more on that, check it out in the Tribune today.
And I'm still from the Sun. FG issues over 3.5 million passports, saves 1 billion naira from reforms. Over 3.5 million passports were issued in the last 2 years, and more than 1 billion naira saved annually through reforms in the passport processing system. Minister of Interior Dr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo disclosed this at the inauguration of the ministry's new passport front office in Abuja yesterday. Said the reforms were implemented in line with President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda to enhance efficiency, security, and service delivery. The minister said the administration met a backlog of over 200,000 unprocessed passports and a debt of nearly 20 billion naira in the sector when it assumed office in 2023. He explained that the backlog and debt have been cleared since then.
Okay, on to the next story, still coming from the Tribune. 2027, ADC coalition is divine. Prime Minister Adele wants to know. Now, that's a man of God who is always commenting on political happenings in the country. I hardly hear him or see him talking about religion or God or whatever, but in any case, let's take this story. The leader of INRI Evangelical Spiritual Church, Primate Elijah Ayodele, has warned President Bola Ahmed Tinubu not to be assured that he will return for the second term, saying the formation of ADC coalition by opposition is divine. Only a spell can dismantle this coalition. The coalition is divine. Tinubu must brace up, he warned. I want to ask, what is divine about that coalition? What could possibly be divine about that coalition?
I think you should meet the pastor and be the prophet and ask him.
No. I mean, you see, the word divine is understandable by most people who speak English. So what is divine about that coalition is my question. We should stop playing to the gallery, actually. But that story, you'll find it in the Tribune today, coming from Pastor Ayodele, who's always commenting on politics and all whatnot.
So I suppose if you want to get the answer to what is divine that Shola asked, you can consult the newspaper.
Well, it doesn't explain, it just keeps on saying it's divine.
Okay, and from this day newspaper, AWS 2025 Champion Solution for Employability, Economic Inclusion. The 2025 edition of the African Workspace Summit, AWS, was recently held in Lagos with a call to address Nigeria's unemployment crisis. through provisions of practical interventions such as skill acquisition and various forms of investment. Over 2 days, the event played host to a diverse audience of early career professionals, entrepreneurs, employers, and development stakeholders. The summit, designed to equip young professionals with actionable tools and strategies, featured a range of hands-on activities such as CV revamp stations, live interview simulations, LinkedIn profile consultation, professional headshots, and personalized career guidance session. For more updates on that, this day newspaper is your guide.
And on to The Guardian, where a report has it that federal government issues 3.5 million passports, saves 1 billion naira from reforms, says minister. At least somebody is doing something right. Federal government has issued over 3.5 million passports in less than 2 years and saved over 1 billion naira yearly through reforms in the passport processing system. The Minister of Interior, Dr. Lubo Metunji, disclosed this yesterday in Abuja at the inauguration of the ministry's new passport front office. He said the reforms were implemented in line with President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda to enhance efficiency, security, and service delivery. The minister said the administration inherited a backlog of over 200,000 unprocessed passports and a debt of nearly 20 billion naira on assumption of office in 2023. I'm going to just call your attention to something. You know, a former Minister of Interior is one of those who are now, quote unquote, one of the leaders of the new coalition, the ADC.
Yes.
Yes. So what would that kind of person be coming back to do in government? I mean, the problems he created are still being undone presently as we speak. Anyway, let me not be too critical and not be identified as being biased. But the truth must be told at all times.
Of course. Okay, and still from this day newspaper, Damagum to disloyal PDP members, leave our party now. People's Democratic Party yesterday issued a stern warning to members involved in anti-party activities, declaring zero tolerance for disloyalty ahead of the upcoming Federal Capital Territory Area Council elections. The warning was delivered during a certificate presentation ceremony held at the PDP Secretariat, where candidates for the local council post received their official nominations. Speaking on behalf of the PDP National Chairman, Umar Damagum, the party's North Central Vice Chairman, Abdurrahman Mohammed, outlined the consequences of party disloyalty. For more updates on that, this day newspaper is your guide.
All right, on to another story that has to do with the party of the moment, the ADC as it were. ADC rules out preferential treatment, bars presidential aspirants from public declarations. The interim national chairman of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, David Mark, has pledged total transparency under his leadership, assuring that no presidential aspirant will be given preferential treatment. This came as the party directed all its leaders with presidential ambitions to suspend any public expression of interest until solid party structures are established ahead of the 2027 general elections. Speaking during a stakeholders meeting of the Kogi State chapter of the ADC in Abuja yesterday, Mark stressed that all members of the party are equal stakeholders and co-owners, adding that the priority for now is to build a strong and credible platform that can win the trust of Nigerians. The ADC has no preferred or favored presidential aspirants. We are first focused on building a platform that is attractive and acceptable to the majority of Nigerians, Mark said. For more on that, check it out in The Guardian today.
Yes, and this one from the leadership newspaper, Kano Emirate Tosso, my supporters acted in self-defense, Emir Bayero. The Kano Emirate crisis yesterday took a different dimension as the 15th Emir of Kano, Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero, said his supporters acted in self-defense in Sunday's chaos at the palace of the 16th Emir of Kano, Emir Muhammadu Sanusi II. On Sunday, supporters of Emir Sanusi and Emir Bayero had engaged in a scuffle at the Kofa Kudu Palace of Emir Sanusi, an incident the state government described as unfortunate, stating that innocent citizens were injured. A statement earlier issued by the Kano Emirate media team, signed by Saddam Yakasia, said Emir Sanusi was out of the palace when the attack occurred. And still from the leadership newspaper, EFCC opposes Yahaya Bello's request for medical trip. Justice Marian Aneni of the Federal Capital Territory has been asked to travel abroad for medical vacation. The plea came yesterday from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) in its counter motion, where it argued that granting the request would delay the trial before the court.
And still coming from The Guardian, but this time it has to do with Rivers State, with this report saying heavy rainfall havoc in communities destroys properties. Torrential rainfall, which began at the weekend till Monday evening with severe flooding, has wreaked havoc in many parts of Port Harcourt and other local councils in Rivers State. Some residents flood. Areas affected by the floods include Mile 1, Mile 3 Diobu Access, D-Line, Ajip, Chenda, Rumolumeni, Rumola, Mpoku, Rumoekini in Obea Akpo, and Port Harcourt Local Council of the state. Other areas most hit by the flood are Choba, Mboga, Alu, Rumosi, Rumokoro, Imohua, Ahua the West, Ahua the East, Ogoni Axis, Oyibo, Onelga, and many others. That's a story that must read. And if you must read, then check it out in The Guardian today.
And still from Leadership newspaper, UNICEF urges Bauchi youth to embrace tree planting culture. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF Bauchi office, has reiterated its commitment to promoting tree planting culture among youth in Bauchi State at a tree planting campaign to commemorate
Let me check.
It's not.
Hmm? It's supposed to work like that.
Well, are you hearing from your headset? I'm not playing that song.
I was giving you an audio signal now.
Yeah, but it's not playing. No coming up.
What's that?